listening to the home of cool, irreverent, and entertaining talk, right here on LA Talk Radio. You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Love. My name is Lucia. I'm your host and a dating and relationship expert specializing in cougar relationships. But this show is not about cougars. It's about texting today. And I'm here to solve your dating dilemmas, take your live calls, answer emails, and, of course, speak to authors. And as I mentioned, today it is about texting, actually flirtexting. So I'm going to bring on my two authors. Today I have two beautiful girls on who are going to tell us all about the art of flirtexting.
Let's do.
Okay, so I have Deborah Goldstein and Olivia. What is your last name?
Anna
Okay, and of course the book is Flirtexting: How to Text Your Way into His Heart. The website is flirtexting.com. And just a little bit about the girls. Deborah owns and runs the personal shopping company Fern Estelle, and Olivia works in the world of book publishing. So I have to tell you, I love the feel and the look of this book. It's you don't see a lot of books like this around anymore. How did you decide to make this, the cover and what you chose as the colors and just everything about the book?
Well, thank you. We actually love the book too. It just kind of pops, and we definitely wanted something that was easy and small to carry to fit into a girl's purse, because we think this is like, the same way we carried around the rules, that book, The Rules, and
right.
He's Just Not That Into You. We kind of thought it was a great concept for girls to just kind of have a handy guide to texting with them at all times.
Well, it was a brilliant idea. So how did you come to write this book?
We actually both Deborah and I were living together in New York City, and we moved, and we were both working in fashion at the time, and we started noticing that all of our friends and us, we would go out, and we just started noticing guys would get our phone numbers, would ask for our phone numbers, and they were texting us instead of calling us. Mm-hmm. And it was actually something that we didn't come from that generation. I mean, we were kind of brought up traditionally where boys in high school would have to come up to our door and meet mom and dad first to ask us out and, to pick us up. And it was more of a talking over the phone a lot to get to know one another. And once we moved into the city about 4 years ago, we noticed this trend was kind of this new dating supplement came into play, and it was texting to kind of feel out one another, and it was a way for us to flirt throughout the day because we have busy lives and we didn't have the time to talk over the phone anymore at work or while we were in the library studying. So it was kind of how this whole thing started.
Oh yeah. Actually, I'm assuming you girls are in your 20s, and of course I'm older than you, and I don't like the whole, when you meet someone they send you a text, because it's like, well, how are you supposed to get to know someone if you're sending me a text? But apparently you say that what you write and when you write back will determine where the relationship will go, which is of course a scary thought.
Yeah, it's definitely scary to think that that's where dating is heading. And one of the things, since Olivia and I have dated before texting and after texting, we kind of see ourselves as having the best of both worlds in that sense. So we know when it's appropriate to text and when somebody should be picking up the phone to place a phone call. And I think that's one of the most important things to understand when you are exploring this world of flirtexting, is knowing when it's appropriate to use the phone and make phone calls and see each other in person, and when to text.
I found that this happened to me and also to several girlfriends, is that we'll go out on a date and then, we say goodnight, and sometimes the guy, as he's walking to his car, is texting us. Have you heard of that?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, it's honestly, text messaging is like a cue. I mean, that happens all the time, I guess, after dates. And if anything, it's just a sign that a guy is really interested and really likes you. I mean, it'd probably be a little too forward for him to call you right after he just saw you.
Right.
And so it's just his way of letting you know that he's still thinking about you. And we actually, that's the great thing about it, is that you have this one extra tool in this dating courtship period to let people know that you're thinking about them. And it's kind of like a less intrusive, not such an aggressive move to send someone just a cute little text to let them know that.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the guys who are, I can't remember the word now, where they just, all they do is text, but they don't want to see you. Have you heard of those guys?
And you have to be careful with those guys. If a guy's only texting you, and especially it's good to understand the times that he's texting you and kind of what that means. Just as long as you understand that, then you know kind of what direction your relationship's going, and to be aware of it.
Yeah, because one guy, I do something differently. I have a landline, which I know most people don't anymore. And so I give out my landline when someone asks for my number, and then I specifically tell them, this is a landline, so no texts. And that's the way to block their texts. And nobody gets my cell number until I know them and I trust them with it, that they're not going to, over text. But one time I hadn't forwarded my home phone to my cell phone, and so I was supposed to meet this guy, and so I had to give him my cell number, and boy, did I regret that, because then it was like text city, like every day. It just always trying to have a conversation, asking me out, but then he would never firm up plans, and we never actually got together ever again.
That's really interesting. I mean, if anything, it does happen, and I think that's also an easy way to kind of weed out the bad from the good, because you don't want to be with someone like that that's constantly, it's kind of like false hope leading you on and texting you all the time. We didn't write this book because we're like, oh, everybody should text message, and while, in the courting stages, that's not the idea. It's just, this is what's happening. Everyone's texting right now, and this is how to deal with it. And what we say is, it's a supplement. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's just one part of this whole dating thing that's going on today that we just need to embrace and acknowledge that it's there. And what Deborah and I kind of went out to with this book, what we wanted to get accomplished is to lay down the groundwork and the rules for how to handle this, because it is something that our parents didn't deal with. I mean, we just started dealing with it, and that's kind of like we were in the world where we dated before cell phones came into play, and we're now dating in a world where there are cell phones. So we kind of had the best of both worlds to acknowledge when it is appropriate for you to be text messaging and when it's not, and that's kind of why Flirtexting came about.
Yes, and thank you so much for writing it, because we needed someone to give us the Flirtexting rules. So now, can you tell from texting if a relationship is going downhill?
Absolutely. If somebody has stopped responding in a timely manner to your text when they previously had, then yes. That's kind of a sure sign. Or if somebody says they're going to text you and they don't, then that's a sign. And also, another big one is if someone says they're going to call you and they text you instead when it definitely should have been a phone call, that's also a good sign.
You know what a big sign I've noticed is, and this has happened to me, where you have this great banter back and forth with someone, you're constantly texting, and they're writing you really long text messages. It's like usually the length of them, and they're funny, and there's a lot of, you can tell when there's thought put into what they're writing to you, and then all of a sudden it goes from one-worded answers. It's like, yep, okay, yeah, sure. When it starts getting like, the shorter they are and the more brief and just kind of almost like snappy, you're like, okay, something's going on. This is probably,
right.
You got to see your way to a new boy or just to move along.
Right. Okay, good. And so then what are some of the benefits of flirtexting?
There's great benefits of flirtexting. One of them is, like Olivia was saying, it's a way for people to keep in touch and keep the sparks alive during the day when we otherwise wouldn't. So when we're at work and it's hard to talk, but you're thinking about someone, it's easy just to send a fun funny, light flirt text just to keep things moving.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think it's also a good way. It helps. It's like for the people that are kind of shy out there, it helps eliminate that shyness barrier, because it's. I think we're a lot more, especially when you first meet someone. It's a lot easier to say things over a text message than it is over the phone or in person that you might just be hesitant to say. Therefore, you can come off a little bit more forward and open to someone, allowing your relationship to progress, whereas you might be hesitant to say certain things over the phone initially. So it's a good way to kind of open things up that way.
And we definitely say in our book Flirtexting that that's the way you should be thinking when you're flirtexting, because since it's happening and it's not going away, we like to use flirtexting as a way almost to empower ourselves. And just like Olivia was saying, if you're the type of person who wouldn't normally say something or maybe ask a guy out, you can use flirtexting as kind of a safe way to maybe get into doing that sort of thing. To texting to get what you want, because it is taken lighter than face-to-face or conversation. So at the end of the day, you can always say, did you not know I was kidding?
Right.
It's easier to do that.
So then let's define, because everyone's heard of sexting, so let's define the difference between flirtexting and sexting.
Well, that's a good definition to start with. I mean, flirtexting is definitely, the initial stages of dating. It's fun, it's flirty, it's witty banter you throw back and forth with a guy you have a crush on. Whereas sexting is something that Deborah and I say should be left to two people in a mature relationship, because it's just another way for them to spark up an already existing, committed, exclusive relationship. Sexting should not be for people who are, trying to get to know one another. I mean, it is the written word. It is going to get passed around. It could lead to embarrassment and further. I mean, I think that's why we say it should be left to the two mature couples to kind of let them get their spark on with their relationship.
Get their spark on. Yeah, I totally agree. Because, you may be sexting someone you just met 2 weeks ago, and then you break up a week later, and you don't know what's going to happen with those texts.
Right.
Yeah, we strongly advise against doing that unless you're in a very serious adult committed relationship.
Yeah.
Because things go wrong a lot in that case.
And I think we all had situations like actually one of our good friends had that happen. She was dating a guy. It wasn't super serious, but she sent, a sexy photo text of herself to him, and lo and behold, she went out one night and ran into his best friend and was putting her phone number in his best friend's, they were just friendly, but she was just going through his phone for some reason, putting her number in there, and she saw the picture of her on the guy's phone.
Oh, no.
I mean, it was dramatic for her because she didn't think that he would do that, but you just never know. You just shouldn't even do that when it's not serious.
Exactly. Totally agree. Okay, so then you say let the guy have the last text, and why is that?
That's the hook. That is the hook, ladies.
Uh-huh.
It's the mystery builder. You want him to want to talk to you more. You want him to call and pick up the phone. You want him to text you more. It's almost like it's like you throw something back, and it's also like if you throw something out there and he doesn't write back, you might get a little bummed. You're like, oh, why won't he write back to me? But it's kind of leaving that mystery that's really important for women to do.
It's cute sometimes when, like Olivia said, it happens to us. We'll send a text to a guy, and when he doesn't write us back, we're going through our head thinking to ourselves, is it something I said? Did he not get it? Does he not like me? And the guys have told us that they do the same things a lot of times in the beginning of a flirtexting relationship, where they'll send something that they think is funny and they want to make sure we get it, and when we don't write back, they're thinking the same things to themselves. So it kind of just gets them more intrigued.
So
the hook.
Okay, so then if a guy doesn't return your text, should you bring it up?
Well, it depends what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look, what do you mean? Like like in what situation would you say?
Let's say you send a guy a text, you initiated the text, and you never heard from him.
like if you're writing to him hi and he just never writes back.
Right.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's probably just not that into you. Because if a guy really likes you and he's going to want to engage in conversation with you, even if he's busy, he'll still write you back. Like, you know, whether it's like a few hours or after work, you should always get a response back. If not, you should probably know that that's not going anywhere.
Because there are times. Are there times when texts don't get there, or do they always arrive?
Well, there's definitely, and that's when everyone needs to remember that cell phones still place phone calls. So, you know, when you're saying, are there, you know, if he doesn't respond back, is it okay to call? And Olivia said, well, what does the text say? And we need to remember that if you need to get in touch with somebody to make plans, or because you're thinking about them and you really want to see them, or it's important, and you send a text and that person doesn't text back, then you have to think to yourself, should I have called? If it's that important, maybe do I need to call? Or if they don't write back, would I be okay with it? So in that sense, you know, I always ask myself that question before I send a text. If it's something that I need an answer to immediately, a lot of times I'll call, because people although we have come to checking our text messages before our phone calls, I think that when somebody goes out of their way, especially in dating these days, to place a phone call, people take it more seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think Deborah brings a good point up, and I think in some ways there needs to be a healthy balance between the phone call and a text message, because I think people do take a little bit of an abuse and advantage of texting. And I know I'm guilty of it, I'm sure. I've had that happen to me recently, where I pick up, you know, been text messaging and he's like, hey, call me, you know. It's like he has to almost remind me, because I'm like, oh my God, that's right. Like, hello, phone. If it's that important, there should be a healthy balance between those two things. It shouldn't just be because it's easier to text that you should be texting all the time. And I think people just need to remind themselves, especially in this day of age where our cell phones have almost become our lives in a way, where we can't live without our cell phone near us, or we freak out if it's lost or has water damage on it. So it's a good reminder for people that it is good to pick up the phone and have conversations from time to time.
Yeah, I totally agree. So then you say to have a laissez-faire attitude towards texts. And what do you mean by that?
That means that when you don't receive a text back right away to something that you wanted to text back from, to not immediately send another text or freak out or get upset when he says he was going to text and he didn't, but he gets back to you later. Because we've seen a lot of girls who put so much pressure on guys in a bad way, and that kind of turns them off. But the second the girl maybe doesn't act as interested or as needy, he'll be more into her. And if that makes sense, that's kind of what we're talking about with the laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah, and it's also funny because a couple of times, you know, if I'm seeing someone and he texts me and then I'm busy, I don't answer right away, he might send a second text.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, within, you know,
it is a good sign.
within let's say 10, 15 minutes. And it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. If I had just waited, I mean, if I had sent a text right away, then he wouldn't have texted twice. So now that I waited, now I know where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good.
Yeah. And an important rule that Olivia and I live by is that just because it's speedy technology does not mean we have to be speedy in our response. And thinking that way when we're flirtexting has always been beneficial to us, meaning if somebody texts us right away and we have our cell phone in our hand and we receive it immediately, it's important to understand that it's just a text. If it were that important, they would call, to take a step back, take a breather, continue doing what we're doing, and reply to that text message when we're ready. And when we've created a text that, you know, is spicy and says exactly what we want to say and makes it a useful
tool.
Kind of time, you know, it's something that we put thought into and that you can tell. So that's important to remember.
Yeah, I think, and this is why Deborah and we both really love this whole art of texting in a relationship, is because it does almost condition you to be patient, and it's a good thing for women to understand that patience is a really good virtue to have in terms of not being impulsive when writing back or saying something right off. If you're one of those people that just kind of something pops into your head and you have you need to just say it out loud. It's not that we're saying hold back, but it's kind of thinking through what it is that you want to put out there, and texting allows you to do that. It doesn't need to be that quick response right off the tip of your tongue. It can be, let me think about it and let me write something that actually I want to write, and not just because it's impulsive and I feel the need as I need to tell that person right now.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story. Last year on my birthday, I was out and I was seeing someone, but he couldn't come to the party. He was working in the studio, so he sent a text around 9 saying, "Oh, I'm still at the studio, don't know when I'll be done." And so I had like 8 people there at the party, and we're all sitting at the dinner table. I'm like, well, what should I send right back? So we all sat there like 10 minutes discussing what I should write back, and I didn't like anybody's answer. Everyone had like a different answer. Oh, tell him this, tell him that. I'm like, and I go, you know what? I don't know what to say, so I'm not responding. And so 2 hours later, then a friend of mine called, and I go, what should I say? And he's like, oh, just, be really cool about it and just go blah, blah, blah. And I did that, and it was fine.
So true. See,
that happens a lot, and that's what Olivia and I talk about in the beginning of our book, Flirtexting. That's kind of what inspired our book. We always found ourselves sitting around with a bunch of friends, going over creating best possible text messages to send to guys. Everyone has an opinion.
Right, and that's kind of what happened. Is like we're looking at one another, we're like, what do we write back? And it's like we sat there and we're like, wait a minute, it was like a light bulb above us. We're like, every girl, like what girl like with their girlfriends right now is not saying these exact words in the same situation on their couch, being like, oh my God, you have butterflies in your stomach because some crush just called you, and you're asking your best friend what it is you should write back. It's just that's where Flirtexting was born. It came out of that whole concept. It's very natural, and a lot of women do it, and that's why we kind of wanted to have that guide and best friend that if she's not around, you have the book to kind of reference, and that's the tone we speak to. The tone Deborah and I relay one another, relationship advice, is the same tone we put into the book.
Yeah, in fact, you do have clever responses to common texts, which are really helpful. And it's funny because your first one is just hi. And I don't know if you've had this happen to you, but haven't you found that sometimes, let's say, if you haven't heard from a guy for a while, he's been out of touch like way too long, or maybe you broke up or something, isn't it funny that usually the guy's first text is just hi?
Yeah, no explanation.
Right. It's like they're just getting their feet wet. They're not sure if you're going to beat them up via text, so they want to make sure you're even going to talk to them. And it's happened to me. It's happened to my friends. And the first text is just, hi.
Yeah, we're not a fan of that. That's definitely exactly what you said. Him not making a commitment, just putting it out there to see. Who knows? And I always think to myself, how many other people did he just text hi to?
Right.
And I don't want to be the first to respond to that. And he should be putting in more effort. And we give girls lots of different ways to respond to that text, depending on where you're at.
Right. Should you just ignore it, too, if you want to?
Sometimes if he likes you and you ignore it, he'll do exactly what that guy did to you. He'll write again, which he should. He should put in more effort.
Yeah, because that's almost like an insult, just hi.
Yeah. Well, if they like you, then, they'll think to themselves, why isn't she writing back? I probably should have said something else. Let me send something else.
Retract.
Right, exactly. So what do you mean when you say to show a little leg and then pull back?
Well, that's a really, actually, Deborah, you explained that really well.
That's, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book, The Rules, and
of
The
course.
Rules is kind of a dating technique that Olivia and I have naturally incorporated into our lives and into Flirtexting. And show a little leg and pull it back means, don't put all your cards out on the table up front. Don't immediately let him know that, you've got nothing else going for you. He's the only one you're dating. You're really into him. You read his text messages and you respond right away. You're going to give everything up too soon. You're going to make the chase go away, and he's probably going to become very uninterested very quickly. So to show a little light and pull it back is to show him a little bit of interest and then calm down and sit back. And that kind of means, if you're texting him back and forth, and everything's fun and you're laughing and everyone's having a good time, then end it on a good note. Like, end it on that note. So when maybe he sends another flirt text that's funny and that he would imagine should receive an LOL or a ha 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 or something back, just don't write back. Don't always feel the need to entertain his jokes and feed his ego, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Leave him wanting more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing where we both have kind of learned that leaving a little mystery is a really good thing.
Yeah.
And we just noticed that with everything, sometimes, we have a lot of girlfriends that didn't quite follow that rule, and they always just find themselves overdoing it, and it's really easy to overdo that over a text message where you don't hear from him, and you want to know that he's there, and you want to keep constantly talking to him and flirt texting with him or calling him and going out with him. And it's when you like someone, it's normal and natural to have those like feelings of wanting that person around all the time, but it also takes a little bit of willpower to kind of still keep that mystery and that spark going, because it is important in the initial stages. Because if you just lay all your cards out, then what's his interest in going further with you, or your interest in going further with him if he lays all his cards out? It's like, all right, like, I know everything now. So just kind of having that mentality of showing him a little bit what you're about and then pulling back a little bit is just going to make him get more involved.
Right, and then he'll wonder why you haven't responded if you're busy with some other guy.
Yeah.
Which we always think he's busy with some other girl if we don't hear from him.
Exactly.
So let's go over some of the steps on how to create the best possible text.
Absolutely. Like we say in our book, Flirtexting, that we really want to, because it's inevitable that guys are now flirtexting when they get our number, we really wanted to take the power back and make it work for us. And Olivia and I came up with sort of a formula in order to get what we want each time through our Flirtext, and we call that creating the best possible text. And the way you do that is, first and foremost, to decide what it is that you want from your texting conversation. Do you want him to ask you out? Do you want him to call you? Do you want him to make you laugh, take you to dinner, that sort of thing? And once you've decided what that is, then the next step is to create
forecast the obstacles. That's a good one. So you know what you want to text him, and then you kind of need to figure out whether he's even in town. Do you remember him telling him that he's hanging out this weekend? Or is there like a Yankee game on and he's like a big baseball fan? Or is it, it's kind of just thinking before you send, because sometimes what are the odds? You don't want to get stuck in a situation where he's like, oh, hi, like I told you I have a Yankee game, can't do anything tonight. So kind of just thinking about what it is that might be in your way of getting what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next is to brainstorm your best possible text. So now that you know what you want and can't predict any obstacles, then it's time to just create a flirt text in 160 characters, to just like you were doing with your friends, like come up with something that's perfect. And we tell people to create the text in a way that will hopefully give you the response that you want, if that makes sense.
Like how? Yeah. Because you often think, okay, if I send this text, will he respond? Yeah, I want to make him respond with what I write to him. So.
And that's why it's important, like what Olivia said, is to forecast obstacles. So if you want him to ask you out for Friday night and you remembered him saying he was going out of town, then definitely don't send a flirt text saying that sort of thing. But if you can't think of anything like that and you want him to ask you out Friday night, and you remember him saying that he is into Johnny Depp and there's a new Johnny Depp movie coming out, then maybe create a flirt text that entices him to want to take you to the Johnny Depp movie. Right.
Okay. And then what about when you send the text? Why is that important? Probably the same reasons you just mentioned.
Well, an important thing to know when we were interviewing a lot of flirtexters for our book, one of the things that guys kept saying is that response time says a lot about a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And that just means when a guy texts you and if you text back immediately, to him it says a lot. And that's what we were saying, it's important to kind of take your time. And that's when timing with text is really important.
Right. It's like the sooner you respond to his text, the more it's just the more eager you come off.
Yeah.
Whereas, you kind of hold off a little bit longer, maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3. Just, if you're doing something, then at the same time he needs to respect that and know that, and it doesn't mean, it just makes him think that, okay, like I'm not the only thing that she's sitting around waiting for is to respond back to me. I mean, if it's like back and forth, you almost like, okay, does this girl work? Does she go to school? It's like the thought process is like, has she been sitting there all day just kind of texting, messaging with me, which is fine if that's how you want to come off. But, again, back to the whole mystery thing that we talk about is just leaving him a little bit wanting more. And that's a major thing guys have brought up with us, is that they definitely can tell when a girl's really into them by how quickly and how frequently the girl writes back to them.
Yeah, because you also mentioned, like answering within 24 hours. But, I mean, I could never wait that long because, I mean, isn't that a bit too long if you wait 24 hours to get back to someone?
Well, I mean, you could be traveling. I mean, it really depends. We say, I don't think it's a long period of time. I think it's a fair period of time. And Deborah and I have discussed it, that it is quick technology. So, do get back within that a 24-hour time period, because anything beyond that's just going to read uninterested to someone. And as long as you write back in a timely manner, I mean, we're busy, we have jobs, and if you can't get back to someone, make sure that you don't take 4 days to get back to them, because then it's kind of like, oh, well, I asked you how you were doing Monday, and now it's Friday. So,
yeah.
And I know what we're saying now seems like a lot of rules and things to remember with timing, but it's also important to know that once the sort of the beginning dating stages are over, and you've established that you both like each other and you want to maybe be together or be committed, that sort of those timelines and the games, and that goes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need to wait or even think about waiting a certain amount of time before writing back, within interest of the other person. But you definitely don't have to worry about that as much once you're committed to someone.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because otherwise, you'll be trying to figure out what's going on in the relationship after 6 months and a year. It's like, I can't.
Absolutely.
Keep waiting around to see if he's going to answer back.
Okay.
Now, what about? So if you want the guy to stop texting and pick up the phone, what should you do?
That's a good one. Well, I mean, we actually in our book, Flirtexting, we mention a lot of these typical scenarios, one of them being this one, in case, a guy keeps text messaging with you and you're like, oh gosh, like call, like I wish you just picked up the phone and called. There's a nice subtle way of getting a guy to call. Say, if you're texting back and forth, you can say, oh, I'm running to dinner, call me later. So it opens up, because sometimes guys might be afraid to even take that step. I mean, if he's a shy guy and you're a shy girl, you might need to nudge him a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. So you could just say, hey, running out to the gym or running to dinner, call me later. Give him that opportunity in a kind of quick, nonchalant, no big deal way, like for him to basically call you. If you want to be like in a funny way, be like, all this texting is giving me carpal tunnel, and be like, call me, And I think it's a cute way, and non-aggressive, and not like, why aren't you calling me, way of letting the guy know. I think you have to give him a little bit of a nudge if you do want him to pick up the phone, and we list some fun ways of doing that, because it is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back briefly to the response timeline, because that's I'm fixated on that. That's important to me. The only bad thing about waiting is, let's say you're on a date with a guy and or he gets to know you and he sees that you always have your phone with you, and so you're accessible and you can respond, or you see the same with him. He always has his phone. He can respond. So then the problem is then when you text him and he doesn't respond for a long time, it's like, well, wait a minute. He always has his phone. Why isn't he responding? Or the same for you. It's like, why isn't she responding? Don't you think that's like kind of a danger of waiting too long?
Yes, there is a danger of waiting too long, and we say definitely to respond if you like someone within 24 hours, and just to be aware that the quicker you respond, the more eager you will seem. And even with girls, I think that, if we had a guy that we liked and he responded to our text messages that we sent to him within 30 seconds every time, it's kind of a turn off to us as well.
Right.
Because you never, obviously if you like someone, you want the feeling to be mutual, but there are ways to be turned off in flirt texting, and I think that being too eager in response time is one of those ways. It's one of those things to be careful of.
Right. That's a very good point Deborah brings up, because you don't want a guy that you met in person and had a great conversation with, and all of a sudden what a buzzkill it is when he just starts texting you nonstop all the time, and it's like, it's overkill.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cute anymore, and it's like, gosh, he was so awesome in person. Why did he do that?
Right. And then, well, let me ask you what you think of this, because my girlfriend was dating someone, and he would constantly be writing, I miss you. Every day he'd get it, I miss you, I miss you. And then she found out he was seeing someone else.
Oh, man.
So it's like, what are you supposed to do with that? It's like, now you can't even trust an I miss you.
That's evil.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I agree.
When somebody's saying I miss you and things like that, it's definitely important to mean it. Exactly. and to know that it is a text message. So, be weary when people say I love you, when people say I miss you, when people are texting you things that they're not saying to you.
Yeah.
Be weary.
Because, that's a good point. Did this guy tell your sister to her face that he would miss her?
It was my friend. I don't know.
Sorry,
no, it's okay. I don't know if he told her to her face after. I'll have to ask her. But I just think, it's okay. I think it's okay to, I guess the red flag is it's okay to say I miss you once in a while, but to say it every day.
Yeah, it's overkill.
Well, that's clearly, if anything, the guy was feeling guilty.
Oh.
I think that was just his way of, it was almost a cop-out for him to even be texting her, I miss you every day, because it's easy. She can't read the tone in his voice as if he were to say it over the phone or in person. So I think that's a really good point to bring up for people to pick up. It's like, if somebody's telling you I love you or I miss you or can't wait to be around you over a text message, and they're not following up on those feelings in person over the phone, that is a huge red flag.
Right.
And what else is important to recognize or to understand that this is something that's happening is that texting is a very easy way for somebody to get attention when they need it. So let's use this example that you were using with your friend and a guy that he was dating someone else. So say this guy was dating your friend and dating this other girl, and he was kind of down in the dumps because this other girl wasn't returning his phone calls or wasn't returning his texts or said something to him that upset him. For him to then text message someone else, I miss you, to get an arousal out of someone, or for someone to then write back, I miss you too, that's what he's looking for. He's looking for attention. He's looking for somebody to fill a void that he's not getting with this other girl. And texting is an easy and tricky way to get that. It also falls into the category of when somebody who you haven't heard from in a while text messages you hi out of the blue. I always, depending on who it is and what kind of relationship I had with that person in the past, I always think to myself, is this person being sincere? Are they really trying to get in touch with me, or are they just having a bad day and need attention from somebody who's a sure thing?
That's a really good point. And that's kind of one of the benefits and kind of, in a way, the pitfalls of flirt texting, because it is a mad flirting outlet. And I think we all have been there where you you feel like you're not getting attention, and say you text someone at night, I mean, be careful. When you're getting text messages out of the blue, like Deborah said, from someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they're like all of a sudden, hey, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, I mean, you got to know that that person's looking for a little attention, a little TLC, whatever it is, from you. And because if it was actually coming from like a place that they wanted to reconnect with you, they would have been doing it during the day, maybe over the phone. They would have given you a phone call or some other means. But that is a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, and also, don't you find it interesting? I'm sure it's happened to you that, you haven't heard from a guy for a while, and the common excuse they use is, I lost my phone. It's like, I've never heard of so many people losing their phones. I have never lost my phone. I've had a cell phone since before everybody did. I had one since the early 90s. So don't you think that's more often a lie?
I think so.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Definitely, and that's something that, I hear so many times. I'll overhear girls saying, oh, I texted him, we were texting and then I texted him late night and he didn't write me back, or we were supposed to meet up, but he said he didn't get service, or so he lost his cell phone. I mean, those are, to me, I just initially think that's a lie. It's an excuse.
Yeah.
And whether it is or not, it's important to think that definitely could be a possibility and not be so naive to think otherwise.
Yeah,
it's easier I think a lot of times for girls to think that it is something else. And I think that you're right. It's very like naive way of thinking at it. And I think that's where girls need to have a little bit more of a tougher skin when it comes to those things. And as much as it's hard to do that when you really like someone, once you just kind of like, oh, no, like strike number 3, you're not doing this to me, and kind of have that attitude, you'd be surprised of how much guys respect that, because so many girls are the other way around. But once you have actually put on like a little bit of that tough act, like, you don't deserve that. And when you let him know you don't deserve that, they love it. And they're like, oh my God, you're amazing. You are totally giving me what I deserve.
Yeah, kicking the butt.
Yeah.
Now, here's the opposite. Then I know a guy who had like a bunch of different numbers. He had like 5 different phones. Have you ever heard of that?
That's shady. That's shady.
I've seen it all. I've seen everything. Now, what do
Was he single?
Yeah.
That's weird.
I know. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of phones to carry around. And then when one rings, it's like, well, which phone is ringing?
Why 5? I understand 2. One's like business, personal,
Sure.
But why 5?
I have no idea.
That's bizarre.
You see everything. Okay, so what do you guys think of marathon texting? By myself, I don't like it.
Why? Why don't you like it?
Well, because it makes you too accessible. It makes it look like you have nothing going on. It's like, oh yes, I just have all this time to just text and text and text.
Good point.
I agree. I agree with you. I'm when I'm working, I'm very focused at work, and if I Flirtext someone or if I get a Flirtext, it's me procrastinating. But for the most part, if somebody's continually texting me, it bothers me because I'm busy and I assume someone else is busy. So I'm kind of against marathon texting, and a lot of times if I see myself engaging in 3 or 4 text messages, I think to myself, I need to pick up the phone and call. I don't have time to continue to sit here and type out all these things. Let's just get a phone call done and move on. But I'm an impatient person.
Yeah. I actually love it. And it's funny because I actually am working now, and I think it all depends. When you really like someone, I'm not saying like marathon texting with 4 boys, and when you really like someone and you both are working and you can't talk on the phone when you're at work, it is a really great way to kind of to kind of get closer. I mean, I can't explain it, but in a way they become, when you really like someone and you have a really good banter with someone, they become almost like electronic love notes. And I'm not talking like constantly, like every second you're talking back and forth, but throughout the day when you're having a kind of balanced conversation back and forth, it's fun, and it makes the day go by faster. And if it's a busy day, you don't talk. But when you're both kind of can have the ability to do so, then it makes you grow a lot closer together. So I like it.
Okay. Well, one likes it, one doesn't. Now, you also mentioned about, feelings plus text equals bad idea. I have a funny story to tell you. There's this guy I was seeing, and I felt like he wasn't paying attention to me, so I tested him. And so I sent a text, and I said, I feel neglected. And he never wrote back.
You wrote that to him?
Yeah, and I go, great, I feel neglected, and now he's neglecting me.
Well, I think the hardest thing with that's why we say don't talk about your feelings over text message. Don't ever, if you feel like you're getting to that point where you need to say something like I feel neglected, pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you have a lot more explaining to do behind that I feel neglected. The way he took it can be completely different way than you actually wanted to present it and how you felt. And it's almost like you lost that moment.
Yeah.
And he completely might think you're a little like, oh my gosh, she's so needy because I haven't texted her or called her all day today. Meantime, you might have been talking about some other issue that was going on. So that's kind of why Deborah and I are always tell our girlfriends, anyone we talk to, don't talk about those feelings over text. It might be easier for those who are shy or scared. It might be easier to put those feelings into a text message, but just know that it's so much, the benefits of doing it over the phone or in person supersede any text message you'll send.
Yeah, I totally agree. I knew what I was doing. I mean, I sent it as a test just to see if he really was neglecting me or if I was imagining it. And then the fact that he didn't respond was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, you are neglecting me because you didn't answer my neglect email or text.
I actually Olivia and I have definitely walked the walk of what we're saying, and but it's still even hard for me sometimes. I wanted to send a text message the other day, basically saying that I need to talk to you about feelings, and I didn't, and I wrote the text out, and I knew I shouldn't, and then I deleted it, and I didn't send it because, like Olivia said, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not allowing, it's not a level playing field. When you have to talk about feelings with someone, you have to do it on a phone conversation or in person, because with a text message they can do exactly what happened to you, and in my opinion that's not fair because you'll never know now. And maybe had you said that to him over the phone, maybe there was something going on that you had no idea about, and you would have given him the benefit of the doubt to be able to explain to you something that now I guess you won't know at this point.
Right. I think people take you more serious too when you don't do it, when you don't talk about your emotions over text. I mean, it is, you're going to have a lot more to say to one another than 160 characters. Like, emotions are not confined to 160 characters, if that makes any sense. There's going to be a lot to discuss, and there's going to be a lot to read off of the other person's face, or the way they're speaking about it, or whether they're choking up, or there's so much to be said for that, and these conversations need to be had. And for you, it's almost disrespectful to do it that way.
Wow. Well, you told me.
Sorry.
Well, you know what? Actually, now I have some advice for you, because you said you wanted to tell him that you wanted to talk about feelings. Don't announce that you're going to talk about the feelings. Just start saying it. Just say, I feel blah, blah, blah. Because otherwise, you're putting out this big announcement, hey, this is going to be an important conversation, and he's going to be like, ew.
Oh, it'd be awful. Like, the wait, the anticipation, it would have been awful. So, yeah, you're right. I definitely knew, just like we know.
Yeah,
we have
course,
an intuition.
Yes, we know. So one final quick question. What is considered cheating when it comes to texting?
That's important to know. Well, we say with flirtexting, flirtexting is great because when you are single and dating, it's a way for you to explore different relationships simultaneously, because flirtexting is fun and light, and there's no commitment involved in that sense. Where the line gets crossed is when you are in a committed relationship and you entertain flirt texts from other guys, or, like I was saying before, if you're in a committed relationship and that person is neglecting you or isn't giving you the attention that you need, and solely for the purpose of getting attention you start flirt texting other people, that's kind of when feelings are involved is considered cheating. Anything that if somebody that you were dating were to see a text message that would hurt their feelings, to me, that's cheating, when you're cheating on an emotional level.
Right, and that's a really good point, because some people might look at it and be like, oh, it's just a text message, it doesn't mean anything. But it is what Deborah just said, if you're emotionally cheating on someone. And it's really important, because as fun as flirtexting is, and as fun it is to flirt with several people over it and have fun with it, it also can backfire if you're doing it and you're committed to someone. So even if it's a joke, or if it doesn't, you're actually not physically cheating or whatever, it should still be mindful of that.
Okay, I totally agree. Well, we have come to the end of a wonderful interview. Thanks so much for being on. I had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course I had to, talk about texting. Because I had so many texting stories myself. So, of course, the book is Flirtexting, How to Text Your Way to His Heart, and that's flirtexting.com. So thanks again for being on, girls.
Thanks so much. You can also flirt tweet with us on Twitter. Flirtexting on Twitter.
I follow you guys.
Yay! Oh, yay!
Okay, take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, and we've come to the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed this talk on texting and flirtexting. I felt it was important to find out what the rules were finally. Thank you so much for being on. Remember that my website is theartoflove.net. My book is at lessonsoflove.net. And until next week, remember that love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.
You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.